Meek? Myers? Peterson here. Ray? Williams? Weiniger? Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is over my left shoulder. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll now move into item number 4, which is the DCSD Spotlight, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Kane to introduce the DCSD Spotlight Video 2022 Youth Congress.
It is blue. It is blue. Oh, now it's working. Okay, maybe it just needed a minute to warm up. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their flexibility tonight and for being willing to move the meeting location to Cantrell at the last minute due to the water issue at Wilcox. A board meeting with no restrooms would be highly unfortunate, so we appreciate everyone being willing to move over here. So last month, over 100 high school students from across Douglas County participated in the annual Youth Congress event hosted by the Douglas County Youth Initiative. During this event, students traveled to our state capitol to watch our legislative process in action, to meet with lawmakers and other community leaders so they can provide their own ideas on how to solve issues that are of importance to students. Students spoke about a variety of topics ranging from mental health, youth criminal justice, pressures to succeed, school safety, youth voices, career and technical education, and even support dogs in schools. Some very adult conversations, and you can imagine how incredibly poised and impressive the students were. I would like to thank the staff from Douglas County that participated, including Deputy Superintendent Danelle Hyatt, Director of Mental Health, Dr. Stephanie Crawford-Getz, and Director of Legacy Campus, Dr. Rex Kaur. With that, I would love for you to see this video about Youth Congress.
We need a way to reach people further upstream long before they're hurting so bad.
Mental health is a real challenge nowadays across all of society, but especially with youth.
It's honestly an important thing to speak up about. It's an important thing to talk about. It can overtake someone's life. People think of it as like a light thing, like, oh, you're just feeling a little bit sad, you're just feeling a little bit down. It's more deeper than that. We know how hard the world is.
There's a big mental health push in Douglas County, and Douglas County youth particularly. We want to know how we can help them with their mental health. So instead of a room full of people like me sitting around and making those decisions, we want to hear from the kids.
I have a few friends that struggle with mental health, and I want to help them find resources and help them get the help that they need.
I wasn't really very happy with how students felt, how I personally felt during the pandemic either, so I just thought it was really important and it would be good for me to be involved.
This is really unique in that Youth Congress, from my perspective, allows students to actually do some of that problem solving themselves and feel what it's like to actually do this work.
The students say the same thing almost every year, which is they need more opportunities to be heard. They're looking for peer support, they're looking for a mental health curriculum, they're looking for social emotional supports.
What we want is their solutions, their ideas, their thoughts. This is stuff that affects them. We want to hear their voice.
We're kind of looking into probably introducing outside resources for our students to be able to, go to when they need that help, and possibly even starting mental health classes for students, introducing a curriculum.
I hope they really consider what we see in the schools, and I hope that they can convey it in our terms.
I hope he's able to take what we do today and convince others to see that what we are saying is important and hopefully implement some of the changes that we hope to see.
The magic of Youth Congress is that there's an opportunity for students to be heard and speak directly to people that are making decisions. When students have a voice, we're capturing that and thinking of ways in which we can implement solutions over the following year.
I hope that from today, students can really harness their passion and their ability to advocate for change. We know that there's a significant challenge here. There's adults and youth trying to work on this. And the reality is we all need to come together and rise up to bring the tide up collectively for everyone.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Kane. We'll now move into item 5, the superintendent updates.
Okay, actually, because we just had fall break, what I really would like to say for my updates is to welcome our staff and our students back from fall break. I hope they had a great week and a great Halloween last night. I got a fantastic email today from an elementary student who requested that the district change our calendar to have the day after Halloween off, because so many kids are sick from candy. And that is a great example, like we just saw, of youth who are really advocating for themselves. So welcome back to our staff and students. We're excited to have you back. And that's really all I have for superintendent updates.
Okay, moving into item 6, Tabor Information Guide process. As a reminder, after the last meeting, the board requested a official readout of what exactly the process was for getting information into the Tabor book.
Mr. Blair, do I have a clicker? I'm your clicker. Fantastic. Next slide. Okay, so as a follow-up to the last Board of Education meeting, there was a request to learn a little bit more about the process that goes into the Tabor Guidebook, as well as the Blue Book that voters receive. So first of all, voters receive 2 separate books. One is the local Tabor Notice Guide, that's the name of it, and the other is the statewide Blue Book, and there are different purposes and different processes for those 2 books. So first, on the general education, or on the general election Tabor Notice Guide, the Tabor Notice Guide, not to be confused with the state Blue Book, covers local tax initiatives and is mailed to every voter in advance of the election. Who can submit questions for or comments to put in the general election Tabor Notice Guide? Any registered voter in the local community can submit pro or con statements about any ballot initiative for publication in the general election Tabor Guide. And then it is the district's responsibility, or the election official, actually, the designated election official, which in this case is Ronnie, responsibility to make sure that that's 500 words or less. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Are those pro and con statements fact-checked? Everything that is published in the Tabor book, whether it's pro or con, is submitted by citizens and is supposed to be printed as submitted. There is no kind of vetting or fact-checking that goes into place. It just gets printed as submitted. Next slide, please, Mr. Blair. So how does that work? Well, the pro-con comments that end up in the Tabor Notice Guidebook, that falls under our Taxpayer Bill of Rights, or Tabor, which is part of our Colorado's Constitution. And you can see here the piece of the law, which I won't read to you, that goes over what we're supposed to do with those comments. But the bottom line is we collect the comments, and as long as they're less than 500 words, they have to be printed exactly as they are. If they're more than 500 words, there's some consolidation that's done, but no changing of the comments themselves or the spirit of the comments. The comments are collected by the district's designated election official and are submitted along with our ballot language to the election office. And again, that's not something that district staff or anyone else can get in the middle of. And that is required. The Colorado Constitution requires that if any summary of the contents are developed for the Tabor book, the election officer again must accurately summarize the comments, and if they are 500 words or less, they are printed as they are, without any kind of fact checking. Okay, next slide, please. The general election Blue Book, so that is the statewide Blue Book that you receive, is a little bit different. The state's Blue Book is a ballot information booklet which provides information related to any constitutional amendment or state legislation appearing on the ballot statewide. Can citizens submit comments? No, not directly. There is a provision in Tabor which requires the pro-con to be published in the Tabor Notice Guide, but that doesn't apply to the statewide ballot and publication of the Blue Book. Tabor specifically exempts the state's Blue Book information from the requirements for publishing pro-con statements as they are written. So who prepares the state Blue Book? The State Blue Book is prepared by a group of nonpartisan research staff of the General Assembly. And so what's included in the State Blue Book is, of course, the text and title of each measure and a fair and impartial analysis of each measure. So again, this is what goes through that statewide or that research committee that's nonpartisan. A summary and major arguments for and against the measure, which may include any other information that would assist a voter with understanding the purpose and effect of the measure. So that, again, is just information that you all have also received in email as a follow-up by request. So I'm happy to take any questions, and Council Klemesh will help me if we have any questions that are general legal questions versus specific legal advice.
Any directors have questions? I'll start with Director Meek.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. I'm wondering, is there anything we could or should do differently in future years? I think I saw that the comments that are submitted are open to the public to see prior to it going to publication. Do we know if that's true or not true?
That you're asking if the comments are open to the public to see before going to publication? I'm not aware of that being the case. Yes, please. Sorry, forget them.
Yes, thanks for the question, Director Meek. I mean, typically the closing deadline for receipt of the pro-con comments is noon on the Friday before they actually have to go out. I think it's the following Monday or Tuesday. So there really is a minimal opportunity, and furthermore, for a public publication of the comment, of the whatever comes in. They must be retained by the designated election officer under the requirements of state law for implementing the constitutional Tabor provisions as a record of the comments that come in. And the statute as well as the Constitution are pretty clear about the publication have to be consistent with what has been submitted.
So in other words, even if the public commented on the comments or whatever for a few days, we still have to submit the comments as they were by the deadline.
Right. I think what I'm wondering is if, and I realize the district's not involved, I'm kind of having this conversation for the public as well. I think the way the law is written, you know, multiple people can submit comments, and I think comments are available to the public if anyone asks to see it. If anyone sees that there's inaccurate information, they could submit additional comments, and then the designated election official is responsible for summarizing everything, right? You can't change anyone's comments, but I just wonder, I'm just trying to think forward, like looking at the law, what is allowed, what can be done. It feels a little strange that the county pays to distribute a book that looks very official, that may not have fully factual information. And so I'm just trying to think, following the law, what can citizens who want to be active and engaged do to engage in that process and maybe help fact check, you know, some before it goes out. So that was just something I was curious about moving forward. And then I guess I'm just wondering, the designated election official is the only individual that is working in this area, right? So I didn't become aware of the book until I was presenting at a presentation and was asked about it. So I was just curious, is that when everyone becomes aware of the book, when it's mailed out? Or Superintendent Kane, when did you become aware of?
My understanding is that we kept the role of designated election official very separate from the rest of the district, so there couldn't be any concerns about interfering in that process in any kind of way. So it was just a very clean way to do it.
Director Ray?
Yeah, I kind of will piggyback off of Director Meek a little bit about what can we do in the future, you know, and I think, Mrs. Klemesh, correct me if I'm wrong, but law sets a minimum standard for what needs to be done. As long as we don't compromise that minimum standard, we can go above and beyond. is always my understanding of the law. So even though the law is silent about vetting or silent about an additional process, it doesn't, to me, mean that we're prohibited from putting an additional process in place, like Director Meek is suggesting. You know, instead of putting all the responsibility on the designated election official, there's really nothing in the law that says that that person can't consult with other people about how to summarize some of the comments that have been submitted. And I think that also gets me to some of the language in the law says summarize, it says accurately summarize. It doesn't say that comments have to be taken verbatim or the comments have to be taken as is. And so I think there's also some discussion to be had about what does accurately summarize mean. And just as Director Meek alluded to, because if Renee had several comments submitted, she would have to in turn make a summary of merging those comments together. And so I think the question is similar, is as we know, we're in these times where I think this just is the beginning of people who are going to want to submit things that are concerning, that are really way out there in terms of factual versus just rhetoric that people want to submit to be harmful. And I certainly see the comment about indoctrinating students with woke curriculum is harmful. I see the comment about alienating parents. That's harmful. That's not factual, nor is it productive to help our voters. And so, I think that's my question too: is can there be a process in place that goes above and beyond, doesn't compromise what the law is intending, but also provides us maybe an additional place where we can at least get back to that commenter and just say, you know, here's some factual information. We know you just submitted your comment. We want you to know these are some of the facts based on some of the things that you're saying. And I think we also have to take to heart, you know, there is in the law that says that comments shouldn't be offensive. And so I think we've got some discussion to talk about what is an offensive comment. And as I said before, indoctrinating children, to me, is an offensive comment that shouldn't be allowed. So I'm wondering the same question of, in the future, should there not be an additional process, not only for us to make sure that we are indeed informing our voters accurately, but also honoring the fact that people should be able to submit comments, just like the law says they can. But I also think that there's a lot of responsibility that gets placed on the designated election officer too, that we ought to be helping her. And I understand that it feels cleaner. It feels like we're not biasing, you know, her role. But I just think that again, the reaction to this particular book has been significant. And I think staff, Superintendent Kane, you've been marvelous. I mean, I think it's given us an opportunity to clarify. So in every crisis, there's always a silver lining, and I think it's been great because we've been able to clarify the facts and even use the media to some degree to even get our word out there even more. But I think we really need to think about, in these times, do we need to have an additional process that goes above and beyond, not compromise, but goes above and beyond what we're legally required to do.
Thank you, Director Ray. Other directors? That's something as one director, I know we've got an election in 1 week from today, and our current clerk and recorder, Merlin Klotz, I assume Merlin is the ultimate person in charge of that book. Is that accurate, or his office?
Again, I think the statute is pretty clear that the comments have to be submitted by the designated election official, which has been done.
Right, to the clerk.
And to the counties which are responsible for issuing notice with respect to the ballot questions.
Okay.
And so with respect to those requirements, I believe that, and again, I do not want to provide legal advice in open session, and I will not, but it is important for us to understand that the law is pretty clear with respect to those requirements and the charge provided to the district's designated election official.
Yeah, I agree with everything that the other directors have said up here. This may be something that, to be honest, completely transcends the school board. I know we have two great initiatives on the ballot this year. My concern as a citizen, not just a board member, is that this could be for any initiative in the future, and I think there's a larger conversation to be had excuse me, around how this process is that's even greater than the school board. So as one person, I'll be going out there talking to our legislators, and we're going to talk about legislative priorities here a little bit later, but this is something I think we as a board could take to the legislature that say we have a concern, and maybe they could seek a remedy that's greater than just our two initiatives, but that's my 2 cents. Any other directors? Okay, thank you, Superintendent Kane.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the study session, item number 7, which is Family and Medical Leave Insurance, also known as the Family Program, FAMLI. We have a 10-minute presentation followed by a 10-minute Q&A.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you about this new law that will go into place here starting January 1. So this evening I'm going to scooch over here if that works for you. This evening I will be sharing just some foundation information about what FAMLI is, or otherwise known as family, the different options that we'll be able to make a decision on that we want to participate in, and then some decision making that will be coming very soon. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is family? So this is the Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Act, and it's a new family and medical leave program approved by Colorado voters in 2020, and that applies to all Colorado employers. But, however, local governments, including school districts, can opt out of the program under certain conditions. So please note that if there is not an opting out process, that school districts are automatically enrolled in this starting in January 1 of 2023, and I can explain more about what this looks like in a minute. So this is a state-run paid family and medical leave program where employees can take up to 12 weeks of paid leave or up to 16 weeks depending on some other qualifiers. With that, there's some different and very important things to be mindful of. For example, employers and employees would be required to pay in to this program. All employees, so if the district opts in, every employee would be required to pay, and there's some more detailed slides here. And also, the benefits would commence on January 1 of 2024 after a year's worth of the employee and the employer, or just the employee, paying into this starting January 1. It's approximately 0.9 of DCSD payroll, and it's around $3.5 million of not planned additional funding. And that premium could rise with a cap at 1.2%. And again, local government and school districts have the option to opt out of the program. Next slide, please. There's 3 different options that we get to discuss this evening. Option 1 would be to participate fully in family. And that means the district would pay 0.45% of the employee's wages, all employees. And employees, all employees would be required to pay their premium equivalent up to 0.45% of their wages. Once you opt in, you are committed for 3 years. Option 2 is employers under the Board of Education vote. We would vote to decline participation under option 2. With that comes some notification procedures to the family division with the state of Colorado with a deadline of December 31st. And then once you opt out as a school district, you do not need to revisit that decision for 8 years. unless there is an opt-in decision within that 8-year period. And under option 2, individual employees, even though the employer would not participate in this, nor would we commit all employees to participate in this, individual employees could still go down to the division or through a process and opt in individually. Then there's a process to do so between the division and individual employees. And regardless of each of the options, the employee's share still would be 0.45% of their wages. Under option 2 as well, there is the least amount of impact to the departments in the school districts in that administration process of individual employee family opt-in. And under option 3 would be, again, a decline vote of employer participation and family with school district support for payroll deductions and administration of the family leave process for individuals that opt in. Next slide, please. It's important to understand what family offers as compared to what DCSD offers in terms of benefits, leave benefits. First of all, the family program, again, as a recap, that leave, access to the actual family leave, would begin January 1st of 2024. They meaning the division, family division, a lot of the components of it are still in process. Portals and things like that. There's still a lot of questions, and they are still working out a lot of the individual processes and explanations as we speak. Under family, leave is provided up to 12 weeks or up to 16 under certain conditions. And employees would become eligible after earning at least $2,500 in wages within the last 4 calendar quarters, and there's a cap to that as well. Under DCSD, we do have a lot of paid leave options, which are featured in our employee guide and on our benefits website. And we have a range of time off and leave, depending on what employee group you're in. Some are between 5 to 30 days. That doesn't mean that we have that large of a discrepancy. Some of our employees have a sick leave, personal leave, and things like that. Other employee groups fall within the PTO allocation, so that's where that span comes from. We do have a sick leave that accumulates without limit, and we also convert personal to sick for use in the future as well. We also have FMLA, and that also provides 12 weeks or more sometimes of paid leave that is utilizing our employees' paid leave time that we do not charge them for. That is 100% paid. We also have some income protection benefits like short-term disability that employees are eligible for, and then also long-term disability. And those are the qualifiers there for short-term and long-term. Our short-term disability pays at 70%, where under family, there's a particular cap. So 70% is pre-tax. And our long-term disability pays at 60%. So we believe in Douglas County, we do offer a really robust leave plan for our employees. Next slide, please. Again, just a recap of the impact of this. So there is a significant additional cost to participate, which is $1.75 million on behalf of the district budget, and then our employees also would need to pay as their wages. As we know, that could divert financial resources from other important priorities. And also, participation in family will require additional resources in terms of administering family, whether it's through payroll deductions, whether it's through tracking and leaves, and just adding an entire new process. And also, there's that 3-year commitment. And it's the requirement for once the district would opt in, it means every employee must opt in. And again, a recap for our employees, the impact if we participated in family, additional impact requiring employees to pay into this premium, 37 to 90% of wages. We're still waiting for clarification of exactly what that sliding scale means and who qualifies for what from the family division. And it's a reduction in wages for our employees, and they would be committed for 3 years. Next slide, please. So our staff recommendation in regards to this new law is that we would decline all participation in family or otherwise option 2. So again, our reasoning, we offer a really good leave program for our employees. And we believe that we don't want to require all of our employees to have to participate and have that 3-year commitment and pay those premiums. However, we do believe it's important that this could benefit some of our employees, and so we want to allow them the choice to individually opt in. And we definitely, under the law, will show them how to do that under the declining of the participation. There are lots of notification procedures, and we would support individual employees through that process. And also, it's important to note, no local school district has opted in at this time. All of our neighbors around us and wider than that are opting out or have already opted out. Next slide, please. Here's that process for opting out. So should the Board of Education choose to decline, there is a vote that is required. So under the law, we would follow our typical board policy procedures for other formal votes. And there's a public notice that is given in the same manner that we would before any other meeting. And we would notify district employees in writing before the board votes on this decision. For example, we have multiple venues for communication with our employees. The across the board that we would call this out in. We also have our district newsletter that we have. We have principal notes. There are a lot of different ways that we can and will communicate with our employees about this information overall and the upcoming board meeting where the board would need to vote prior to December 31. And also it's important to know that the Board of Education must take public comment or hear testimony or offer that opportunity before voting to decline in family. Again, as DCSD staff, we will provide employees with our written notice about this and any decision that is made regarding the board's vote. And then we have 30 days to communicate with our employees to help them understand how to access family individually should they want to opt in on their own. Once this vote occurs, if the board votes to opt out, we would revisit this decision every 8 years unless something were to come forward in the future to opt in. And last slide, please. So brief recap of a timeline. So this evening's board study session, so that everyone understands what family is and what our options are. We would send out notification to all employees within this week and within other communication venues with our newsletters. That's just overall information and the upcoming board meeting on November 15th, where we would allow any public input and vote prior to the board vote. And then again, we notify employees of the vote result, and then before the 31st of December, we would want to ensure our employees have access to multiple communications so that they know how to access the opportunity to opt in as an individual with the family division. Happy to take questions. Thank you, Mark.
Any questions by board members? Sure, Director Williams.
So I just want to clarify that this is in addition to FEMLA?
It's in addition to FMLA.
Okay.
But however, we believe it's concurrent with it. It wouldn't mean that an employee who gets 12 weeks of FMLA would get another 12, meaning totaling 24 weeks.
But then they would get paid by both family and FEMLA, or?
So how districts are interpreting this right now, including us, and thank you to lots of support here in the district and our legal team for helping us with this. Say an employee takes their FMLA leave and they're utilizing that leave protection and utilizing their leave time. Once that exhausts, then family would kick in if an employee needed to do that, and or we could begin the STDI, the short-term disability application process under our current procedures.
Thanks, Amanda, for your presentation. I just wanted to make a comment. The company that I work for, I actually work close to the payroll department, and we're choosing to opt out as well of this. I know it's different with a local government than how we have to do it, the processes, but very similar. The company offers just as good leave benefits, if not better. Why pay into two programs? It's a waste of company money. It's a waste of employee money. I like that they give the option for employee to pay into it if they wish. But I'm in agreement with you. I think if your company already offers all of this great leave, why pay into another program? I think the purpose of this was kind of to force the hand of some companies who didn't offer it, but I know that DCSD has a great benefits and leave, and I think the recommendation is a good one.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just curious, what is the cost for option 3? So option 3 would be we would help employees with the administration if they choose to participate, correct?
Yes. We can bring forward costing or get that information. It would result in most likely FTE type staffing in order to administer in multiple departments.
And my second question was, what process did you use to engage staff in coming up with the recommendation?
This was based on an evaluation of, one, comparing what other districts are doing as well, and then an evaluation of our current offerings, and the purpose of next steps would be to engage with our employees on this through this notification to our employees.
So that would be the engagement process, is just sending out a notification. We haven't talked to employee council or engaged in any other ways.
We let employee council know that this is coming, and we would be engaging with them in our November meeting. But they have been a part of our benefits programming conversation for multiple years now as we talk about total compensation.
So, Ms. Thompson, if I'm understanding correctly, then really the only time family would be advantageous is when an employee runs out of their sick leave benefits in our current leave program. Is that correct?
Yes, and if they were not eligible for some reason for short-term disability.
Okay, okay. I know back when we did a resolution on benefits, we also in that resolution talked about exploring sick leave bank again to see, you know, for those employees who run out of sick leave, what are their options other than just being docked and pay? And at one time, and certainly in many other districts, there is that sick leave bank option where all employees contribute to a bank so that those employees that maybe run out get that benefit. Where are we with exploring that possibility?
We are currently in our utilizing our current short-term disability benefits, so that is not, we have not explored that.
Okay.
As of current.
Okay, very good. No, and I would agree with Director Weniger. I think your recommendation's right on, given the facts that you presented tonight. I think it makes a lot of sense. Although with Director Meek, it would be really helpful to have the teacher employee voice before the board's asked to vote on which option, whether that's employee council. I know at one time, I don't know if we've reactivated or not, we had an insurance committee or a benefits committee many moons ago that would actually, again, was a cross-section of employees that would give feedback about things like this. But I know it would be helpful for me to hear the employee voice as well. But everything I'm hearing tonight, I would totally agree with your recommendations. So.
Thank you, Director Wright. And the great news... Can you move the mic? Oh, sorry, yes. The great news is our employees under option 2 or 3 would still have the opportunity to access this upon their own choice. So we're really excited that that is an option, so that we're not requiring that our employees pay out of their paychecks for this additional benefit unless they want to.
I would just reiterate that I think in that resolution, I would like to see some plan of action for us to begin exploring well, how do we help that employee who does run out of sick leave? And what are our options? I know we have the short-term leave, but we've oftentimes heard that that's not sufficient just because it's only a percentage of their income as opposed to 100%. So I would still like us to talk about that in the future in terms of being in compliance with that resolution. What are we doing around that sick leave bank notion in terms of how we help those employees?
Just to clarify, if the employee elects to individually participate, are they still entitled to 100% of the benefit as they would be if the district had opted in?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I
I'm
thought I
glad
had
you
to be
said that.
missing
Yes.
something.
Yes,
Okay.
great point, Director
Okay.
Hansen.
We'll just leave it at that then. Okay. That makes absolutely no sense. Okay. That's wonderful. Is that if the individual employee opts in, does the district still pay the 0.45?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Director Hansen. That probably needed a clarification because it defies logic. Relative to options 2 and 3, if I get this right, yeah, if we can just go to that slide, thank you. If in both options, in fact, except for option 1, that's the only place where employees do not have individual choice. Everyone is forced or mandated to participate. Options 2 and 3 leave the choice squarely in to each employee to either remain opted out or opt in individually. But the impact to the district, if we go with option 2, I understand if an employee comes to you and says, okay, we, the district, did not opt in, I would like to opt in, you're still going to, as an HR department, provide them guidance on how to do that and steer them. The only difference with 3 is we are not then picking up the administrative burden of processing those payroll deductions within the district. Is that really the
Yes.
only, so ultimately 3 would be saving us administrative expenses. I know over the discussions of bond and mill, we've often talked about how lean DCSD is, especially in HR. It's one of the superintendent's favorite comparisons to other districts and to the industry standard. We know how lean we are at HR. So as one director, I believe in your recommendation, as it sounds like the other directors do. And specifically, I would not choose option 3 because it puts a burden on our staff, which is already operating incredibly lean. So I support option 2.
And Director Peterson, thank you, or President Peterson, thank you for that. Would also like to share that, of course, we would find if an employee has to self-report wages, we would either have existing information for them to provide out of our employee system and or find ways to make it easy for an employee who elected in on their own to self-report that information.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Any other director comments, questions? Director Meek.
So, I mean, I agree that I think, you know, the option that we're talking about with option 1, no, it's option 2, to decline, probably is where everyone would land. I just want to highlight, you know, we're making decisions that impact our employees, and I'd much rather see us engage them before we say this is the decision that we think is best. We actually allow them to be in the conversations and bring them along. And I just feel like our decision making is a little, I think staff is making the right recommendations on these decisions. I just would really like to see our stakeholders engaged sooner in the process. I think it helps them understand and bring them along. And so I just feel like if there's a way for us to think about how to engage people sooner in the process, I think it would help us in the long run. So thank you for all your work.
Any other directors? Okay, we'll be moving on. This will be item number 8, review the Board of Education's legislative priorities. This is something I understand, and Director Ray can help me on this, something that we usually look at annually. It was not done last year due to the COVID impacts and things like that. So it's been 2 years since we've looked at it, and I would call everyone's direction to that first paragraph because I think it's a pretty good summary of what the intent of these priorities to do. And it's to guide the interactions between the districts, local, state, and national law and policymakers. It incorporates and certainly refers back to our District 5 ends, which we've been discussing as a board since we started this school year. And it really gives guidance for any unaddressed legislative issues that arise or issues that may require additional interpretation. So this is something we're required to do via our policy governance. It says it right there, 1.2.4. We are required to direct, we have the responsibility to create a favorable legislative impact for our students. With that, we're not taking action on this tonight. This is a discussion. Hopefully what will come out of this is, without going into granular syntax and wordsmithing, unless there's something that a particular director really wants to get in and thinks we have to be very specific. What I'm hoping to do as a president is get a general feel for each of the items under here, where the 7 board members sit generally on an issue. We will put together, or I will ensure that is put together before the November 15th meeting, my best summary of what I believe the board feels under each one of those. And then at that meeting, if we need to kind of take a scalpel and change specific words or strike things out, we'll do that at that meeting. With that being said, I will open it up for any comments and conversations. And if everyone here is in agreement, we'll kind of just go down the general paragraphs here. Is there any comments just on the first paragraph, why we have this, or the next section, which is, and if Mr. Blair can try to keep up with the scroll, the honoring the concept of local control in education as outlined in Article 9 of the Colorado State Constitution. Obviously, we're going to have to make some technical changes. We don't have 68,000 students. We have 64, some things like that, but we'll do those little cleanups. Director Weiniger.
I mostly have a question on this document's use. Like, is it something that staff looks back on certain times, or just mostly around the why we have this?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think this document does us no use or does us little use or good if we don't approve it as a board, get consensus among the 7, and then get this out to those target audiences, meaning our local, state, and national legislatures. If they don't understand what our priorities are, they're not going to be able to assist us or alert us. The other thing is, I know, this is going a little bit beyond this document, I know the district had a legislative lobbyist in previous years. We don't have that, and I think that this may lead into a larger conversation or an expanded conversation later date about, do we need a lobbyist for the district? I, as one director, believe it would be a very good idea and a way to have close monitoring of all the things that come before the legislature that either are supportive of our priorities or are contrary to our priorities. And on a case-by-case basis, because I'm sure Council Klemesh would agree, we don't want to weigh in as a board on every bill and item going before the Colorado Chamber, but there might be some select issues where this board wants to actually make a statement as a board, depending on if we are greatly in support or greatly against an item as outlined by the board priority. So I think that was a great question, Director Weiniger. Director Wray.
Yeah, I think you covered that well, Director Peterson. I would just expand on a couple of things for Director Weiniger. This also is given to CASB, so because they certainly serve as an advocacy group as well, kind of like a lobby group as well for the State House. We would oftentimes, on an annual basis, have breakfast with our elected officials that represent this area. And so we would also provide them with this document also, so they would know what our priorities are. It's also helpful, I don't know if Director Meek and Director Peterson just attended the CASB's delegate conference or not, but CASB's always on an annual basis coming up with new propositions. So this document really serves that delegate that goes on our behalf well to have this, as Director Peterson said, something that we all agree on our values. I do want to give props to former Board Director Holtzman, who really was the person who first put this together, this legislative platform. And what we're really proud about is that we really took the time to, excuse me, align it with our board goals, because we really felt like, again, aligning everything just really made sense. So that's why you see in this document the subtopics of our goal are end statements, so that it shows that not only do we believe this for our district, but we also believe that legislatively this ought to be something that is done to help support our accomplishment of those board ends. So those are just a couple of other ways that they're used.
Yeah, I'll second what Director Ray said. I think having the outline just reflecting the order of our goals is very convenient. It makes it easy to put those sub-bullets under our ends. So just if I could bring it back, the honoring Colorado's local governance, is there any, other than the obvious numbers that we'll have to correct in there, is there any concerns that any directors have with those two paragraphs in there? The only one that I have is actually, again, not to wordsmith it at this point, that last sentence, it almost seems like we're directing legislators, DCD area legislators are urged. That's kind of asking them to contact us. I would probably just rewrite that as some type of partnership. You know, we are looking to partner with them, just soften it a little bit, but that's, I mean, we can make that change. Director Meek.
Kind of along that lines, several districts will actually host a meeting with their local elected officials, and they would go over this document together and talk typically before the legislative session starts, and then encouraging them to reach out as education bills come out. There's 70, 80 education bills a year, and so this is really meant to help, you know, decision making along that lines. But I also think it's a great tool to use, and potentially we might want to host a meeting.
Agreed. I think that's a best practice, and we can look at possible availability of local legislators at our fall retreat and may be able to just address it there. And if not, we can certainly get on a schedule for another time to have the legislators meet with the board just to go over this document. Other directors on general thoughts or the local governance before we move through the supporting legislative priorities for each of our ends? Okay, Mr. Blair, if we can go down under academic excellence. And I would say as the president, one of the things I would look to do as we go through these again in generalities is back to the purpose of this document. If there's something that is specifically legislative in nature, I think it definitely belongs here. If there's something that's more policy related that we could do in policy as a district or through operations, I would actually move to strike it or to condense those things just to give clarity to our legislators on anything that's there. Go ahead, Director Ray.
Yeah, I think it's important, though, to realize that we don't always know what comes up in terms of bills. And so while I understand your advocacy not to replicate policy topics with legislative topics, many of these could come up as legislative topics. And so I think it's okay, from my perspective, that those topics overlap. Because oftentimes we will see a new legislative bill that comes out that addresses this. So these were really more, I think, statements of values that reflect us in terms of both policy and legislation. So I would be uncomfortable striking certain ones just because we think it's going to come up in our policy, because it may very well come up in a future legislative session as well. So just a thought.
Other director thoughts in general or thoughts on the bulleted items under academic excellence? I think the only thing I would like to reemphasize throughout, and it was in the beginning statements, is the local control. Under B, where we're looking at equitable access to all public schools, I would probably either add or reword that just to indicate our support of school choice here in Douglas County. I think school choice is something we can really pride ourselves on, and then recommit to choice for parents and support. Again, maybe something in there around local control and honoring school choice. C is something that's interesting. I know we have, he's probably here somewhere, although I'm not looking in the normal spots. Yeah, Mr. Reynolds, sorry, you're on my left, not on my right. I'd be interested on the superintendent's thoughts or your thoughts around the reduction in mandated student assessments. In one case, we need the data, right? We need to see where our students are. Are they growing? Are they achieving certain milestones? But I also understand the concern that we don't want to teach to the test, and we don't want to just go through so many testing evolutions that it's laborious and it's running our folks down. So I was wondering, Superintendent or Mr. Reynolds specifically, if you had any comment on, let me get the right one here, this item C there around a reduction. Is that something we want to advocate for, or do we want to try to manage that locally?
It's certainly up to you all what you want to advocate for, but I think from our perspective, a reduction in redundancy is a great thing to maximize our use of instructional time, but at the same time, at least just speaking for myself, for me, I'm a big advocacy of the importance of accountability and embrace the importance of accountability. And so I think perhaps the board could consider, if it wants to decide, any kind of statement on support for the concept of accountability, and then followed by, but it would be, good to eliminate redundancy among testing so that our students aren't sitting for something that's fundamentally testing the same skills multiple times within the same time period. I don't know, Ms. Reynolds, if you would like to add anything to that comment.
Good evening, President Peterson. Great question. Really, when it comes to any of the state mandated data collections, and I'll be more global than just state assessments, we always balance the need for the data and the desire to have the information so that we know where our students are with the demands that it imposes on our teachers and staff. And that's constantly an evaluation that we have to make. And over time and over the years, we've seen that balance shift. Where sometimes it's more demanding than others, and this is really just about keeping a watchful eye on that.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you, Superintendent Kane. I'm almost wondering if we need C, because we do talk to those points that you just hit under D&E, that balance of measuring growth and achievement and supporting that system accountability. And I think that's the intent of C, is always keep a good balance, but also always focus on accountability. So I'm just wondering, in the current climate, if C is something we want to advocate for as a board across the state, or whether D and E to me kind of mean we'll take care of it locally, but we support that. So just a thought among other directors. Director Meek.
Superintendent Kane, do you know when the accountability audit is supposed to be coming out?
I'm not sure of the exact timing, although I did throw my hat in the ring to be able to get involved in that process. And that the Denver area superintendents have also talked a lot about our accountability system. And so something that I've advocated for with the Denver area superintendents is the idea of an accountability system, and I've also floated it past Commissioner Anthes, the idea of an accountability system that does eliminate redundancy and allows districts to have the flexibility to be able to use what works for them while maintaining the state's ability to do apples-to-apples comparisons across our state in both achievement and growth through the Colorado Growth Model, which is something that is really important for accountability for taxpayers, parents, and other stakeholders of our educational system. So there is a lot of discussion, per your point, Director Meek, that around accountability this year. And I think if the Board of Education is so inclined to have some kind of statement that summarizes, what your values are around accountability. For example, we support accountability, we support flexibility for districts and local control and efficient accountability systems. In other words, reduction of redundancy, but certainly accountability systems that really do accomplish the goal of moving growth and achievement for each and every student forward. So, there's an opportunity, I think, for the Board of Education to be able to make a statement around that accountability value that could become really critical as we go into this legislative session.
Thank you. I just know there was a piece of legislation that has an audit being done on the statewide accountability system, and I believe the results are supposed to come out anytime now. And I would hesitate to really change anything until we even see what the results of that audit are, and also maybe better understand some of the statewide work that's underway in this area. But maybe that's something you could help us collect some data on. Would be helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate both of those comments, and I think the key thing I took it there that we may want to work into language is reducing or eliminating redundancy, because that's not efficient. It's not great for our students, and then when we have redundant measurements of the same skills, it doesn't give us any more data to identify deficiencies. Can we keep scrolling down, Mr. Blair, if you can? I think we go down to, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Director Myers.
I just have a couple of questions, and mine is going to be based on middle school experience. So when we tested our middle schools back in my day, we had a beginning, mid-year, and end of school testing. So when you talk about redundancy, and you're talking about redundancy of skills, math skills, language, can I have that clarified? I mean, to me, there were very lengthy testing for these kids, especially middle school kids.
So an example might be that we use a local assessment here in Douglas County School District. We use iReady, and you're right, we do it 3 times a year or 2 times a year, depending. But we are also doing state testing through Colorado Measures, the CMAS testing, and that happens during a similar time frame as the spring iReady testing, and it goes over similar skills. So I think when we're talking about redundancy, just making sure that we're not kind of doing the same thing twice, or if we are, at least we're doing it with a distinct purpose. Mr. Reynolds, would you like to add to any of that?
Okay, then just for clarification, CMAS, no matter what, do we have to use CMAS because it's a Colorado? Okay.
Under the current accountability system, yes, we have to use CMAS at least for our 3rd through 8th graders, and then in the case of high school science.
And I know this is not up to us, but is there some over too much testing, do you know what I mean, within the CMAS? Is it too lengthy? Are those some of the issues I think that kids are having? Because I mean, by the time of the end of the year, kids are kind of over testing. So do we go through the state? How do we condense? How do we get just the basic that we need to get these kids some data, get us our data?
Yes, it's very lengthy, I would say, and our iReady assessment is lengthy too, so that we're able to make sure that we're hitting those state standards. So that's kind of the first answer in that regard. And then the other question is, you mentioned testing fatigue of students. So I think something that we don't talk a lot about when looking at the Colorado Growth Model, and I personally, again, am an advocate of accountability, but when looking at the Colorado Growth Model is that idea of garbage in, garbage out. So we have certainly found in our district where we have a high rate of opt-out among our families, and often we have students, particularly our middle school students, in fact, who don't choose to put their best effort forward when due to testing fatigue or whatever other reasons, or they just don't see the importance of it or whatever it might be. But when they don't put their best foot forward, the Colorado Growth Model can crank through that data and come up with all kinds of great graphs and statistics and everything else, but it won't mean anything if the data that went into the system wasn't accurate data to begin with. So I think when speaking of accountability, we always need to keep an eye on the input as much as we do the output. Thank you for that question.
And just real quick, Director Peterson, I think back on C, I think we don't want to lose sight of what Director Myers brought up, and that is the instructional time that it takes. And I think that's what Superintendent Kane's addressing when she talks about duplication and replication. So I think we want to be careful I agree that the language about replication, duplication is certainly what we're hearing, but also it is about as Superintendent Kane said, assessment fatigue is a really big, important point. And I think really we have a big part of our community that's worried about that do opt out of of testing because they fear that. So I think that's some language we want to make sure we get, that we continue to have in this particular priority. And then the other thing I wanted to just bring your attention to is number F, or letter F. I think that this kind of addresses your question around school choice, because it really does talk about that we want to be able to continue to offer the school options, the school choice options that we currently have, and decide to expand or stop or have the flexibility to make sure we're giving kids everything they need.
Yeah, noted. And what I'll try to do, I've got a couple notes here, is try to consolidate those items there. Maybe we could do a CDE, just get down to the consolidated point, because I think it's kind of double tapping those. But duly noted, and I think definitely assessment fatigue and a reference to try to reduce opt-outs would be in here somewhere. So we'll work that into the language. Okay, Director Weininger.
I just wanted to add on to that too. I think it'd be nice if we kind of group the ones that have similar subjects. A lot of them are about assessments, and it'd be nice to kind of have those grouped together and maybe in less bullet points, and then about school choice and accessibility. And then it looks like the last couple of few are about special education. So just an idea, just to make it more easily readable.
Mr. Blair, if we can just go down to put G at the top. On Director Ray's to pile on, I think when we look at G and H, we can probably consolidate those back into the mandates for testing and assessment mandates and kind of just cover that all in one. And then G, I look at that as just another reiteration of local control that we definitely acknowledge and support, continued control of instruction, and of course that'll be guided by what is determined by the local school board. So moving down to I, this one surprisingly when I first read it I said, oh geez, we'll never strike that. Of course we support our students with dyslexia, but then I got concerned that if we only call out dyslexia, what things are once we start listing, we make the potential error of not including everyone in the list. So I'm a little worried about I. While I do agree with everything under I, that we support programs for our students that are dyslexic, I also support support those programs for the students that are twice exceptional and the students that have affective needs and. So I'm wondering if we can't wrap that up into either a general supporting of all learners, whether they are talented and gifted or have additional needs or requirements, or just can't. Maybe we could summarize that in, and if you could go down, Mr. Blair, to J, which is after that, similar thing. We talk about opportunities for special education and gifted and talented learners. I'm wondering if we can't just consolidate I and J into a support programs for all learners wherever they fall on the spectrum of learning, so we're not singling out. Other thoughts from directors on that one?
I'm just going to give you a little more history on that, Director Peterson. So this particular topic was an active legislation was going on around it. And so when we did this document, we wanted to give a lot of definition in terms of supporting things like universal screening for dyslexia. We had an advocacy group, certainly in our district, that really wanted us to look at, science-based evidence type literacy programs. So this really was a reflection of the current times. So I think you're right. I think we can certainly do some condensing to make sure we're talking about all students who have special needs. So.
No, thank you. In that context, it's important, which is exactly why we update this or strive to update every year, because there's always going to be something interesting that's a movement in the legislature. Moving down to outstanding educators and staff. Opening up for any director comments on here. I actually have a couple additions that we may like to see here, but in general, other than, again, the reemphasizing the local flexibility, the local control, I think those are all things we have. Any comments from directors on anything A through D under the outstanding educators and staff? Again, just may look to consolidate these four into two, because I think D kind of echoes back into C and some things like that, but kind of keeping with the theme of it. Director Hansen.
Sorry. Are we only looking at editing what is currently provided, or are we making additions? Additions? Okay. I think that it would be very relevant, given the current national shortage of teachers, to include something that just highlights the challenges that we are facing, and somehow tie it in neatly with the state certainly has high expectations for performance, and we sure would be fantastic if they could pay our teachers to make those expectations realistic. Thank you, President
After this,
Peterson.
Director Hansen, please confiscate Superintendent Kane's microphone so we can do less passing, but thank you.
Sure,
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, President Peterson. I was also going to advocate, just from a staff standpoint, that things that address the nationwide teacher shortage, such as additional pathways to teaching and an ease of access to teacher preparation programs, or again, those additional pathways to teaching would be, and a maximum flexibility for school districts to put who we think is best for our kids in front of our kids. So those are the kind of things that staff feels might help advocate for the national teacher shortage crisis that we're in addition to what Director Hansen just said. And I will hand my microphone over.
Thank you, Superintendent Kane. And I would say, just based on my personal discussions with some of our building leaders, that's definitely something they would like to see. But the concerns I have heard is, but do it with rigor. Don't provide pathways that lower the bar and reduce our standards for what we expect in our educators. So maybe if we can combine those two themes, something about pathways, but ensuring rigor, ensuring that we have quality teachers, or some other words in there might be good. I really appreciate Director Hansen's comments around the retention and addressing the national shortage. Two other things I would like to see in there, don't know the words, but I would like to see something about local control over evaluations. So if we want to, certainly we want to control our own evaluations, and we don't want to have a state-directed, mandated, top-down way of assessing our staff. And that would include whatever the district comes up with for incentives possibly in the future to reward superior performance, things like that linked to evaluations. And then also something, and I'm going to try to channel my Director Myers hat here, something about reducing administrative burdens on teachers or mandates, because every time we ask them to fill out more data gathering exercises, more reports, more compliance things for the sake of compliance, we're taking away their time, their effort, and their hours to fulfill their prime instructional mission. So maybe something in there that we could mix in around reducing administrative burdens, ensuring quality, rigorous, but independent pathways. And then the third one, something, or just maybe could be a one bullet around local control over evaluations or something about that. If any directors have any comments on those additions. Director Ray.
Just a word of caution. Certainly we did kind of pioneer our own evaluation system a few years. It not only was extremely costly, but it was extremely burdensome to our teachers. And we opted to do our own, as opposed to using the state framework that had come out, which would have been probably a simpler solution. So just exercising a little caution from what that means, because if we try to create our own, the burden then comes back on to administratively, how do we do that? And it may not be the best interest of our teachers if they're being asked to do additional things that their other counterparts in other districts don't do because they use the state evaluation tool.
No, I believe that's sage advice, and I certainly didn't mean to imply that we want to go it alone, but if we get something that comes in that we just said that's not appropriate for DCSD, we would want the autonomy to do something either in lieu of or in addition to if we think, yeah. Yeah, just, thank you, Director Williams here, I would, just off microphone, just not having a mandate is what she said, and I think that's what I'm shooting for as one director as well. Director Myers.
I'm sorry to go back to this, but I want to ask when we talk about pathways, one of the things that I've also been out of the schools and understanding that many of our schools have professionals in their schools now, just not our charter schools, but our public schools that are working on getting their teacher's license. So these are people from the communities that are, you know, have a degree, their subject matter. So did I hear a conversation once that in a possibly legacy that we could have our own teacher evaluation assessment so they could get there, and it's quite costly for our teachers, I mean for our people that are in or trying to teach.
So, may I? Thank you. So what I think you're asking is about us being able to prepare our own teachers or give them a pathway that won't cost them as much money. And I think that is something that staff will eventually make some recommendations regarding, is pathways that we can provide within the current guidelines and legislation where we can make it as easy as we possibly can in terms of financial burden and otherwise. I think when we were talking about pathways, though, we were also just talking about, we're in a position now where we often don't have, or at least we're heading to a world where we may not have a traditional licensed teacher to be in front of students. And we've got to be able to have some pathways to be able to get highly qualified people that we know are going to be high quality educators, but be able to help them get in front of students as quickly as possible so that we do have teachers in front of our students. And Ms. Thompson, I don't know if you have anything to add to the discussion about providing alternative pathways for people to get an educator license while maintaining high quality, of course.
Thank you. I'm really excited that you asked that because we just had a meeting later this afternoon, one of multiple, really looking at lots of options. We do have a lot of alternative licensure options that we are starting in pathways, not only in what CDE does provide for us, but also in utilizing and growing our career tech ed licensure processes. Really trying to engage with the state of Colorado licensure department on special education licensure and other options to grow our own, even an EA4 or an EA to teacher program. So we're actually putting all of that information together and mapping out current state and next steps in order to make sure that we can do so and grow our own here in DCSD. So we appreciate any support with that.
Yeah, you will be hearing more about those efforts soon. We're actually very excited.
Okay, moving down to, I believe, the safe, positive culture and climate. This one will be a little more contentious, I think. We have, so the first one, we talked about reducing gun violence in our schools. Again, as one director, I might reword that as promoting a safe environment and not just looking at one specific issue in there. I think we want overall safety, whether that is around any type of gun violence, bullying, harassment, any type of things going on in the school.
President Peterson, can you move the mic closer?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Blair. And then possibly some addition here, I think it would fall in after A, just restating, given what's gone on to our north, something about supporting any legislation funding that promotes local partnerships between school districts and local law enforcement, especially in the areas around training, response, information sharing, anything like that that really promotes that partnership. I mean, I frankly think we have an excellent partnership with our law enforcement. I've spoken about it publicly many times, and that is not the case to our north. So anything that can legislatively promote, fund, or increase training, information sharing, readiness, and in fact, I think this would be a great one, and I know Director Hansen sits with me, and we've talked about great information sharing we have, like the Handle with Care program here in DCSD, but it doesn't go across county lines. What if we have a Douglas County student that lives or attends school across lines? So maybe something, again, we wouldn't put that in here granularly, but something around information sharing among districts, among law enforcement partners, and things I think would be something we would be interested in promoting legislatively. Okay, any other directors' thoughts as we go? Director Weininger.
I think a lot of the last ones where we support funded legislative efforts, I'm not necessarily sure. I think we want to give the money, our money to government to figure out some of these things.
I'm sorry, which one?
Oh, like the last, like E through J, where they all say funded legislative efforts. Plus, I don't know if vaping is necessarily something that's still, I mean, it's still a big deal, but I don't know if we want it on here. And then I'm not sure what social media literacy is, although I know it would be nice to have something around the safety around social media. I've been to a few classes on that, and those are actually really beneficial, especially for parents. But yeah, that's just my take on this section.
Yeah, I was going to make some comments around that, and mine were going to be kind of, yeah, in that same area. I think we want to be careful on, we don't want mandates, and there's some of these things where personally, I'm not in support of youth vaping, or I think our students need more social media literacy and some other things in here, but I don't know how much, carbon consumption within DCSD. I would never want to see that as a mandate. In fact, I don't even want to empower the legislature to direct us around those things. I think a lot of this we could take care of either through policy or just operations through the superintendent, her district leadership team, and her staff. I have a couple questions about those. Is this something we really want to try to solve through the legislature, or are these local problems? And in fact, it was this section here when I was making my initial statement about, which things are legislative and which things are problems that we should handle locally as a school board. So I'll open it up to any other director's comments, but I agree with Director Weininger that maybe some of these could be struck, although they are areas of concern. I would just actually not like to have the legislature weigh on these. I'd like to handle them locally. Director Ray.
Yeah, I think the key words, though, I think in these statements are funded legislative efforts. I don't think it's asking for mandates or asking for them to solve the problem for us. But I think what oftentimes happens, as you know, is that there's such reliance on the school to use the minimal funding that we have to deal with all these issues. So I think, to me, I would focus on the word funded, that if there is going to be expectation that we increase students' social media literacy, for instance, that shouldn't become an unfunded mandate to us. It should, and I think that's what these are speaking to, is anticipating that the legislature is going to talk about it, and they may very well put out some mandates that say you must have a bully-proof program in your schools, which typically happens to us, and then all of a sudden it's like, where's the funding for us to do that program? So I think the key terms, again, is funding efforts as opposed to mandates.
Yeah, I actually, I think that's good, because when we're talking about funding, I think there are a couple in here where I don't see any funding attached to reduction of carbon consumption, and I trust Mr. Cosgrove and everything. I know we build energy gold star, I don't know what the terms are, energy efficient, environmentally responsible schools, and I know that's the standard here. The interesting one is funding around student financial literacy. That's one, again, maybe take offline. We don't have a requirement. I know other school districts have a requirement for financial literacy prior to graduation. Again, if they're going to fund it, that's awesome. I would support that funding, but maybe something we should think about as a board. I know we missed the SAG presentation on that last year. Director Williams, did you have something?
I would actually just say that I'm not against legislature funding things around students' financial literacy, and I think this just says we support the legislature in doing that, but that doesn't mean that we have to follow through to do anything here, that we would just support them if they choose to do that. So I actually don't think I have issues there. I also don't necessarily agree with mandates, but I don't think this says that we're mandated to do anything, so.
Thank you. When I read this, I agree with Director Ray's interpretation. It's not saying, please legislate and create a mandate that we need to follow. It's saying these are programs that would be very beneficial for you to create and fund. And I actually see vaping as very much a relevant issue. My babies are a little older than yours, but it is still very much something that is happening within our youth, and I think it would be very beneficial to also include fentanyl somewhere. I think there are going to be some opportunities for statewide just educational opportunities, and I would like to advocate for a movement toward that from at a state level.
I completely agree, and now I understand what it's trying to say. If maybe it can be reworded that way as state programs, that would make it good by me.
Yeah, not to be a dead horse, but I think all of those are issues that were being discussed at the state level through potential bills or interim committees, et cetera. And this was our attempt to say, we support it, but it needs to be funded if it comes down our way. The other one I definitely want to call out is the carbon consumption reduction one. That was a very interesting conversation at the CASB Delegate Assembly the other weekend. There was a resolution around that, and lots of lively debate. I would love to hear from our students around this topic a little bit. And has the student SAG ever had this as one of their committees or subcommittees?
Are you speaking of vaping or?
No, I'm sorry, the carbon.
No.
I was just curious.
Yeah, there is a subgroup that does, that works concurrently with our safety and security group, and our safety and security director, but no, we haven't talked about that.
Okay. Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation at CASB.
Yeah, so I'm hearing loud and clear about make sure we explicitly link the funding and maybe just one kicker thing that says we oppose all unfunded mandates, right? Because we don't want any of these if they come unfunded on us, but if you're going to fund them, absolutely. Mr. Blair, if you can move down to collaborative parent, family, and community. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Director Weiner, you're keeping us on our norms. In fact, we are 7 minutes over, thank you, our 30 minutes to discuss this. We would have 2 sections left, which would be collaborative parent, family, and community relations, and then financial well-being. If the 7 members are in agreement, we can continue on this. As one director, I'd actually like to continue through, because I think if we get the input in this meeting, we'll have a chance at being much quicker on the 15th when we try to write up and honor everyone's comments and desires in a redraft to take for signature. So I'm hoping that every minute that we spend today on a shorter meeting saves us a minute and a half on the 15th. So unless I have someone that would like to stop, but thank you, Director Weiniger. Mr. Blair, if we can go to collaborative parent and community, you might be there. All right, thank you, we're right at A. So the first one, why I totally support partnership with parents, guardians, families. I don't know what the legislature can do I just don't see that as a legislative issue, although it's something I completely support. Not sure how the legislature is going to react to that. Director Ray.
Well, Director Meek, you might have to help me. Is it CAPHI, or there's a organization at our legislative house that really looks at parent engagement, that really defines standards for parent engagement. So I think that, was it? SACPI. I knew it had a pie in it.
And if we can get that acronym, I'd love to explicitly include such as, just to give it some relevance. So if there is a link, then let's put that link in there. So I just didn't understand how we could get them to act on it. There is one addition that I'd like to see in here, and it's around an issue that I've been seeing, and it would be around supporting legislation that respects and supports parents' values and beliefs, and making it clear that parents have a right to make their own, make decisions regarding their children's education in accordance with their personal faith, family customs, upbringing, things like that. Because I think those things might be coming out here through Colorado. I know they're being discussed in various ways throughout the states, and I think anything that puts parent choice into education, again, back to without creating administrative burdens and burdening the teachers and creating all this reporting, I think would be something we would be interested in supporting. School choice, again, determination, and we don't have to get real specific, but I think as one director, I'd like to see supportive legislation that reinforces the role of parents. Any comments from any other directors on that? That would be an addition.
Just a question, Director Peterson, how is that different than what letter A is trying to get at?
Yeah, A is around partnering with parents, guardians, families, and businesses, community members to empower students. This is really about supporting the role of parents and just legislation that may say the parents have the right to, instill, nurture the values and beliefs in their children that they align with. Raising your children, how that might manifest, and again, I wouldn't put this in our legislative priorities, is future efforts around curriculum transparency, opt-outs, other things we would have to act on as a board and policy if we wanted to make changes here. But from a legislative side, I never think it's a bad idea to put the parents in charge of education, all parents. Director Hanson.
Go ahead.
No, I was just to follow up, I was going to suggest that we expand the language in this, because I think we need to talk about the partnership more than, who has control of education, because it really is a partnership. It's really not, that one person has veto power or one person has the rights for all decision making. So I think I would like to see us expand that language to include some of the things that you're saying that we should value. A partnership does value that a parent should be able to raise their child in the way they want to. The partnership should value choice for how the child is being educated. So I just see us expanding that language a little further to maybe accomplish what you're suggesting.
I agree, and the word respectful has to be in there as well. So, Director Hanson.
I actually have used Director Meyer's three-legged stool or the triangle analogy so many times, and I really appreciate having a visual for it. But when she speaks about the balance between parents, students, and the actual educators, I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying, but I feel like the way that you stated what you'd like to be included here actually makes the parent leg longer, and the stool fall over. we have to have an equally worded measure for students and for educators. And if we can identify in our document where those balancing pieces are, I'd be happy to support something like that. But I worry by just adding one of the legs that we're creating an out of balance triangle, and our stool's just gonna fall over.
No, that's good. I think maybe we can, without using the graphic, because we'll have to describe that.
I can do a graphic.
But I think actually describing all three would be a more balanced approach. We recognize that we need these three components, and we can define the parent role as such, but we can also define the extreme importance of engaged parents, but also competent, excellent educators and engaged students. And I think if we define all three of those and support all three legs of the stool, as you put it, I think that would be good, and I will try to word something around that.
Sounds great, thank you.
Other comments from other directors? Okay, moving down to, just so we can see it, C and D, Mr. Blair, if you would. Or, well, yeah, it says B and C. We'll have to, or thank you, B and C. And I have no issues with those. I think it's, okay, if there are no comments, we'll move down to the last one, which is financial well-being. The only thing I'd like to see possibly in this area is something that explicitly talks about the elimination of the budget stabilization factor. Is you all know, over years, we've set the School Finance Act from 1994, if I got that correct, Superintendent Kane, sets the per pupil funding. This has been a lot of the discussion that we've had to have in education around why we're running Initiative 5A, the mill levy override, on the ballot. And a big contributor to that is they set the funding and then the state takes back a chunk of that funding, the clawback, also known as the budget stabilization factor. And I think as a district, we should support elimination of the budget stabilization factor as a goal for the legislature before adding new mandates and stuff on top, because it really is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're going to fund this, but then we're going to take money back from you. So I'd like to see that kind of right up front with the financial well-being. That's the only real addition, other than I think we need to change the wording of, I believe it's E if we go down there. Nope, sorry, Mr. Blair. Supports, it might be, no, there it is. It is E. Obviously, we're going to have to reword that for the passage of universal pre-K and add that into our support, because that's obviously new for the district. Do any other directors have any comments on any of the bullets under financial well-being?
No, I agree with you, Director Peterson, in terms of the budget stabilization factor. I think we can include that in A, certainly, as it lists out some of those Colorado School Finance Act issues that need to be resolved, and certainly I agree that's one of those. So wholeheartedly agree. I know we, on number C, where it talks about not diverting public money to private schools, I know we got a community member that commented that we may need to also just include schools that are not authorized by the district. It might be better for us just to use the term schools not authorized by the district, just to kind of capture all schools that we don't authorize. Our funding, as we've stated, as you stated well a couple meetings ago, is directed to the schools that we authorize, and that includes charters, neighborhood, magnet, et cetera.
Yeah, I had personally written in here, just adding the words county public tax to fund DCSD, PK, schools within Douglas County. I was going to offer those small changes to address that. I do know that we all received an email as board members today about potential funding issues coming out next year, and one of the things I did note in that email that I thought was interesting was the governor's intention to add $7 million to the CSI mill levy override match, and that may be a result of the discussion that we've had here in Douglas County. And I personally, as one director, believe that's exactly the right thing to do, because that's what the legislature voted to do. They said the General Assembly would take care of the CSI authorized schools. I applaud the governor and the legislature if they take that up to actually step up and fund that CSI equalization fund. But I think we can make those wording suggestions that you suggested or alluded to, Director Ray, to make sure we're talking about district authorized, district funded schools. Any other comments from other directors? Okay, and if there are none, I think I've made copious notes on all 7 director inputs. I will do my best to consolidate those and have something for us to look at, and we can always make fine-tune changes or additions, retractions prior to the November 15th meeting. With that, let us move on to item number 8, which is a board review of education legislative priorities. This is set for a 30-minute discussion, and Mr. Blair has it up. Thank you, Mr. Blair. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I just say legislative priorities? I'm sorry. I'm working with my alternate cheaters here. This will be item number 9. It is still a 30-minute discussion. Thank you, Director Myers. And it is our continuing discussion of our ends. We've gone through mission and vision. We've discussed ends number 1 and 2 in the previous months. Now we're up to end number 3. And again, for folks that are attending, this is really for us to give our staff and the community an idea that although we've got a new board in here, new group of 7 members, that we are committed to our ends. And it's also really to give the superintendent, her cabinet, and the district leadership team the information they know to develop interpretations and ultimately monitoring reports. So with that, Mr. Blair has it on the screen. Do we have any comments from any directors on end number 3, things that they believe should be changed, added, removed, or any other comments on that? This is a 30-minute discussion.
I don't have much to say. I mean, I really actually like this. I think it's concise, which is how I like things, and it still encompasses everything I think we need to focus on for a safe and positive culture and climate, and not just include those in our school buildings every day, but also community, and it tells why we value it, and it's because that's how our students will succeed. So I just actually think this is really well done.
Yeah, I just had one minor suggestion. Under the 3rd bullet, behavior expectations are clearly articulated, supported, modeled, and taught.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Director Meek. Any other comments or any other thoughts from any other directors on additions, changes, deletions? I personally agree with Director Weiniger. I like this end is written. I think it's fairly concise, and hopefully it's fairly easy for the superintendent and staff to interpret. Director Williams.
So I think I said this last time we went over a different end, but I just think we should be careful not to make edits now and then again, perhaps when we talk about monitoring reports, when Superintendent Kane gets to this end. I would just caution us to not be making changes, numerous times per year.
Agreed. Thank you. Any other directors? And we do not have to take the full 30 minutes. And we do not have to take the full 30 minutes. So if we have no other, we will move on to item number 10, which is the President's reports. Oh, sorry, Director Meek.
I'm sorry. Just one last thought. I wonder on the last bullet, multiple communication systems. I wonder if it's communication and engagement systems are available and used. It kind of gets to the point of having our stakeholders be involved, not just communicated to.
Agreed, and just for expectation management, my intent is for us to go all the way through them unless we have a really emergent thing where we think we need to vote in a change, to just go through the process, get it over to the superintendent, and when the interpretations come back, if we need to make tweaks, we'll kind of go through all 5 at once and make those. But I am taking notes on all the suggestions, and I think they're good. Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 10, which is the President's report. Board of Education regular meeting is scheduled for November 15th, hopefully in the Wilcox building. Agenda planning for November 15th will occur Thursday, 3 November at 10:30 a.m. A Board of Education fall retreat is scheduled for 30 November from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. to occur just prior to the CASB conference in Colorado Springs. So that board retreat will be down in Colorado Springs. Big reminder, 1 week to Election Day. We have 1 more week for folks to get out, get the vote out. That goes to all of our staff, obviously to our board members. I know many of you have been doing incredible yeoman's work out there, walking, talking to neighbors, getting on social media, getting on public media. I'll put a plug in for myself. I will be on the Kim Monson Show tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. For those that don't know, Kim Monson wrote the con argument to 5A, 5B, and I am looking forward to a robust conversation with her on those issues. But 1 week, so if you haven't filled out your ballots, I don't care what you do on the rest of the ballot, mark yes for 5A and 5B, and you know, you can undervote the rest of it, but just get it in for 5A and 5B. I did meet, so other things. I did meet last night with the new interim president of the Douglas County Federation, had a wonderful meeting and thanked her for the union's contributions to get out the vote on 5A, 5B. She indicated she will probably be setting up individual meetings with other directors to talk about what that relationship looks like going forward. Got a lot of questions, and I've gotten these from various parents, so I figure I'll do this in an official forum. We know that the previous, earlier, we had the CDC Advisory Committee recommend that the mRNA COVID vaccines be added to the schedule for school attendance. And I've been getting a lot of questions about what is Douglas County School District going to do on that matter. The good thing is the board has already voted and spoken on this matter. If folks want to look back to the December 7th meeting of last year, there was a resolution passed by this board, and in that resolution, I'll just read it under the second, therefore be it resolved point, that in furtherance of the board's respect for and support of personal autonomy and choice, unless otherwise directed by federal, state, or local law and/or public health order, there shall be no district policy requiring a COVID-specific universal vaccine mandate for district students and staff. So we've already voted as a board on this, so the simple interpretation of that is if CDPHE or a state body comes in and issues a lawful order that requires it, of course, we as a district will follow the law. But barring that, we have already voted on that as a board and will not be adding that to our list of required vaccinations, nor as a condition of employment for staff. The last thank you I have goes out to Mr. Mark Blair, Tommy, and the rest of the folks from IT who, when the Wilcox water system shut down earlier today, made an incredible effort to get over here, set up, make sure that this meeting could be recorded, offered to the public, and did all set up. So just a quick round of applause for our awesome IT team. And our awesome election representative and assistant board secretary, Renee Brockman. So thank you. With that, I will move to number 11, vice president items.
So first, I just want to say a huge thank you to those that have been out walking for 5A and 5B. I know I've had the great privilege of walking with many people sitting in this room tonight, so thank you, thank you, thank you. And also big shout out to two schools that I walked with admin and teachers from, both Legend and Cimarron, so huge shout out there. Thanks for everyone doing that. And then at the risk of sounding redundant to all other board members, please, we have 1 week, so anything we can do to rally behind this, let's do what we can to make it happen. And just a quick, in talking to constituents, you know, we still hear sides, you know, this side doesn't want to support because of this, or this side doesn't want to support because of that. And one thing that I just keep reiterating to everyone is this is not politics. This is about doing what's best for our children. In 5A, it's making sure that we can give our staff extra funds so that they can stay in this district to touch our most precious assets, which are our children. So just, that's number one. And then obviously, you know, 5B is building schools and being able to keep a safe learning environment for our students. So again, this is about our kids. It's not about sides. It's not about politics. And then my request would be that when the rest of the board members talk, like, if while we're up here tonight, reach your sphere. I know we've heard from other directors. I remember Director Hansen a while back, you, in actually a couple different forums that I was with you at, you really spoke from your heart saying this isn't about where we stand politically. This is what's doing best for kids. And so I would like each of us to reaffirm that as we go down during our reports. But that's all I have.
So we're into the last item here before adjournment, director items, board committee, liaison reports. Just one of the things with the norms, if we have things where you're out visiting schools or you're a liaison to a committee or did something of note, absolutely feel free to bring it up and share. I think we need to get that word out to our community. But if you have other items that are agenda items or policy items or things, I think Director Ray's been doing a great job of like getting those items to me, things he'd like to see preemptively for future meetings, other things. Just please get them on the agenda planning. Again, we have that this Thursday, and we will try to sequence them in where appropriate. But with that, I think we started with Director Meek last time, so if we can start with Director Hansen, any items, board committee and liaison reports.
I didn't plan a motivational speech. I was wanting the extra time. Honestly, though, I have said multiple times, very real and very raw what I was feeling, and I'm not sure that I could repeat that or add anything. The one thing that I was going to mention was that I believe we're at a point that ballots need to be dropped off, not mailed. Is that okay? Just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. Okay. And
Sorry, we were just validating that you were correct, and
okay,
I believe you are
perfect, yes,
correct. So
yes.
don't stick them in the mail. Take them in person to your local, and you can drop them off.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who has voted. I have been out yesterday and a little bit today, and a lot of people that I spoke with have already voted. Those who haven't, let's do this. We need to do this for our staff, and most importantly for our students. They deserve the very best. And I think I said this in the commercial, so I'll just repeat this, but the only way we can give our students the very best is by providing our staff with the very best. And this is an opportunity to really step up and put our money where our mouth is. Let's give our students what they deserve.
I hate going after Director Hansen. But I will say just one thing. Director Myers and I gave a very condensed version to our student advisory group about the need, the financial need for our district, and maybe push the envelope a little bit to kind of advocate a little bit for 5A and 5B while we were there. They did take a vote, and they indeed formally, based on the majority of their votes, endorse 5A and 5B. There were several students there, actually probably about 6 or 8, that actually are at age of being able to vote for the first time. So it was pretty exciting to be able to encourage them to get out the vote as well. And so just so you know, all our committees now have certainly endorsed this, and I don't think I need to reiterate, but this has been something that we've talked about since 2018. We've known that we need to continue to get into the cycle of asking our community to continue to support education in Douglas County School District, to maintain what we have, which is just an amazing school district. So Director Williams, absolutely, this is not a political issue. This is a heartfelt issue for all our students and staff to say that we want to maintain the magic of Douglas County by passing these two issues, so absolutely. I also will say I had the delight of talking to our teacher cadets at Ponderosa High School today, and it just reminded me that there's an opportunity for us to really do some nice recruitment. And I was kidding the class today. I said, so if I have a contract right now, you will sign that you will work in Douglas County School District when you graduate with your teacher degree. And but it was just so refreshing to hear our youth choosing education as a career, and the cadet program is incredible. They get out, they observe, they teach lessons, they really operate in many ways like an educational assistant for our teachers that are fortunate to bring them into their classroom. and their observations are just amazing. They're so insightful in terms of what they're noticing. And I asked them, I said, what do you see that you will take with you when you become a teacher? And, you know, and they talked about all the different strategies that our teachers use to help manage behavior, but also to help students self-regulate. So they're just really doing a great job. And I will just do a shout out to Kimberly Baldwin, who's been in our district, I don't know, 15, 18 years. She's a CTE teacher for family consumer sciences at Ponderosa High School, but my goodness, she is a leader in our district for CTE, and just continues. She gets grants. I had the pleasure of seeing her classroom conversion from our 2018 bond on all the new equipment that she now has to provide students with that culinary experience. Just truly, truly amazing, second to none. So anyway, definitely yes on 5A, 5B, and let's continue to recruit our students. I just think that's a ground that we really need to go after, because these students are ready and they're very focused about wanting to be teachers, and I think we need to really encourage them. And I don't know how we can connect them with human resources to some degree, and maybe you guys already are out there with them, but man, I just think we want to really foster that enthusiasm. So that's all I have.
Well, as I've reiterated in the past, I seem to get to be on the best committees when it's particularly with kids. So Youth Congress, and Miss Iverson was there in the CTE with me, the group, and as we've learned, our kids don't mind being vocal, do they? So I always want to say the schools that I go and visit, I'm always so appreciative of the principals that on a tour we get to stop and talk with teachers. And I actually went to one of the elementaries last week, Flagstone. I've got 2 t-shirts last week. But I enjoyed getting to go into the classes, actually being introduced and talking. And then I was at Ponderosa also with DCYI last week, and got a pretty big earful. They do not, about 50 students, and they don't mind letting you know what they think, which is perfectly fine. And there were several community Commissioner Layden was there, Marcia was there with DCYI, we had a couple of council members. So they're out, we're trying to hit all the high schools this year, taking a whole bunch of pizza that gets eaten, and the kids are more than willing to tell us. So tomorrow, if anybody has time, I'm at Castle View with DCYI also, with the students, and more of our community people that we're working with. And it's great. I'm curious to see from one end to the spectrum at the high schools, just seeing what all is on their minds, because it's pretty nice. And I'm thinking that they would let community members come in, but we had quite a large group. And I'm going to let Director Meek get and talk about DAC.
Yeah, just on the school visit side, I was also out to Pondo, incredibly impressive automotive shop, welding, and I was also able to tour the culinary spaces. So not only do we have great programs, and I know Mr. Windsor's over there nodding, and the Legacy campus is going to be great. Let's not forget about the other great CTE locations we continue to have across the entire district, and Legacy will be a great complement to those existing programs, and it's something that I was able to see firsthand, and it was really impressive. Now, I thought the board members did a good job with their videos, and I really enjoyed filming a spot with Director Ray. But I've got to admit, we were completely upstaged by Simon, one of our young students from Northridge Elementary. And if you haven't seen that video online, my gosh, he nails it. In fact, I may not show up on the show tomorrow morning. I may send Simon, a 3rd grader, to put the record straight on how the School Finance Act works. I mean, he had glasses with different liquids and MLOs, and man, we should just put him out there. So Simon, if you're out there, if you're listening, thank you very much. That was excellent. And with that, passing it down.
Just a liaison update. I did end up going on the interviews for the library board of trustees. It was 2 full days, but it was actually really interesting. So I was grateful to be a part of it. And I believe the board of commissioners are deciding on whether to take our recommendations either today or sometime soon. So hopefully they go with who I recommended, but we'll see. But yeah, that was enjoyable. And then I just wanted to give a thank you personally to those who have walked with me trying to get 5A and 5B pass. John Freeman, Serenity Hayes, Allison Fox, Eric Woldite, Craig Stanforth, Katie Hassett, Missy Norman, Matt Solak, Danny Windsor, Amanda Thompson, Matt Reynolds, Danelle and Troy Hyatt, Superintendent Kane and her husband John, and Becky, Director Myers and I have been on a couple walks, as well as Director Williams, Director Peterson. And just thank you guys so much. Just having support and someone else to walk with you and just talking to constituents has been so great. And just leveling with them on what this money is being spent on. That's really all they want. So it's been very vital. And we have one more weekend to do it. I'm doing 2 more walks Saturday, 9:30. Meeting at Pine Grove Elementary, and then 2 o'clock meeting at Clear Sky. And then I'll also be doing a honk and wave on Thursday at Parker Road in Lincoln, so you can wave to me if you drive by.
So I absolutely support 5A and 5B, and I think all of us are promoting it in our own ways, which is great, because we get out to different constituencies. I want to thank President Peterson for going on the show tomorrow morning to talk about 5A and 5B. I think that's really important, and appreciate you doing that. I've been having open Zoom calls, so anyone can dial in, and it's Let's Talk, and it's been really interesting answering people's questions, and I look forward to continuing those kinds of opportunities, because I think it's really helpful to answer whatever is top of mind to our community. Let's see. Oh, and on those calls, I have to commend the district, because the resources we have on the website are phenomenal. And so the level of accountability and transparency, so those have been my big questions as I'm out. I go during the week in between meetings and, go throughout Highlands Ranch area, but the big questions I get are around, how do we know the money's going to go where you're saying it's going to go, which is a very common question around elections. And the transparency with the website resources is really, really helpful in that regard. So yeah, big shout out. So, so that's been really good. I visited Thunder Ridge High School today and had the opportunity to visit with the principal briefly, and then some teachers, the wood shop and construction and the welding. And it was amazing. I actually brought something that was made by our students. Look how beautiful this craft work is. I purchased it. So go to Thunder Ridge. I didn't take it. I wanted to. My husband's like, you really need that? I said, yes, I do. It's so beautiful. And the work they're doing there, but the best part of the visit was talking with the students. So I talked with the students who, they are loving these opportunities, and it's the problem solving, they work together, it's collaboration. So it's just a huge shout out to the programs in our schools and the work that's underway. And I mention that because 5A will help us retain those teachers to be able to be there to help our students and really move them along. And it's making such a difference. Let's see. The principal there also explained that yesterday on their PD day, they actually invited representatives from industry in to talk with other teachers about the skill sets that the students or employees that they want to hire. Just the amount of enthusiasm in our schools is phenomenal, and to see how they're actually working to incorporate what our students need to be successful is so very important. And I think it's just so rejuvenating for all of us when we get into the schools. But to have that firsthand knowledge when you go on shows and you're talking about what's happening in our schools. So I just commend all of my colleagues, because I know all of you are out there visiting schools a lot. Let's see, LRPC, the Long Range Planning Committee, they are working on some updates to bylaws, so I think we will be seeing those in the near future. The Community Connections Plan, There are 2 dates we're trying to lock down, and I've heard from a couple of you, but I may tackle the other ones before you leave tonight to try to lock down a couple of dates so we can get those planned. The DAC meeting, let's see. There's a new teacher joining the DAC, Brian Demokos. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Secondary school position. The SAC bylaws are being updated. Let's see. We had a great presentation from Danny Windsor on the bell schedule change and great dialogue and conversation. And then they're planning the DAC forum, so stay tuned for those details. So that's, I think, the big thing with the DAC. And then lastly, the retreat I know we're working on in the near future. Do we have a plan for pulling together the agenda for that? I'm just wondering what those details are.
Yeah, we've secured the services of Matt Cook from CASB again. I'm working with Matt on some proposed topics, and we should be getting out there to socialize among the 7 directors. So first thing, and thank you to Renee for her diligent efforts to secure a room on location where the CASB conference will be held over the following 3 days. So you just reminded me, if any directors have not confirmed their attendance in the conference, Renee has a deadline coming up this week, so please confirm your attendance with her. But agenda to be coming.
And so all board members are welcome to send you ideas, right, to work on compiling that? Okay.
Okay, with that, if there are no further comments, we will move to item number 11, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I'm sorry? Oh, yes, we're in working session, but we still have to adjourn. Yeah. Okay, motion by Williams. Second by Myers. And Hanson? Meek? Myers? Peterson, aye. Ray? Williams? Weininger, passed 7-0. This meeting is now concluded.